All right. Just gonna quickly figure out. Just gonna send the stream link out. I can never really find the link to get the stream out on social media that isn't the that isn't doing it after the stream goes live. So yeah, now putting it on social media for anyone that wants to join in. And hello everyone, welcome to what is certainly a very, very surprise podcast, live reaction video, whatever you want to say. This is certainly one that I was not expected, but I'm very, very delighted to talk about. We have with us a massive, and I mean massive, slate of fights that Showtime has announced not even an hour ago. Well, roughly an hour ago. We have 9 different fight cards. One of them is a pay-per-view event. And I'm going to quickly run down every single boxing card that got announced for Showtime. And we're talking from May 15 all the way to September 11. Just a number of really, really good cards. So let's quickly run them down. May 15, Luis Neri versus Brandon Figueroa for the WBC Super Bantamweight title. Then you got Danny Roman against Ricardo Espinosa and Xavier Martinez against Abraham Montoya. May 19 on Showtime, you got Nordingo Bali versus Nonito Donaire for the WBC Bantamweight title, which has been a long overdue. Fight was supposed to take place last year, but it didn't because of COVID. Subriel Matias versus Batirshan Jukembayev in a IBF Junior Welterweight title eliminator. June 19th on Showtime, Jermell Charlo, the one that's at middleweight, against Juan Macias Montiel for the WBC middleweight world title. And then, I guess the big event on June 26th, on pay-per-view, Showtime pay-per-view, Gervonta Davis versus Mario Barrios, a fight that we've been expecting to get announced for quite some time. For Barrios' WBA regular junior welterweight title, the super champion for the WBA at junior welterweight is obviously Josh Taylor. He's going to be facing Jose Ramirez in May. So it's actually about a month after that fight happens. So it's going to be a very, very good month for the 140-pound division. And then you got in the co-main event for that June 26th Showtime pay-per-view, Erickson Lubin versus Jason Rosario for the WBC junior middleweight title eliminator. We'll get into the junior middleweight title situation in just a second, but and for those of you who maybe are lost and didn't quite catch the first beginning of the Showtime announcement, you can go to my Twitter at Carlos Toro Media. There is a thread that has every single fight that got announced by Showtime, what date it's going to be, whether it's going to be on TV, whether it's going to be on pay-per-view, every single fight at Carlos Toro Media on Twitter. That's where it got, that's where I also posted them. So in case you guys also want to follow them along. And at the end of the stream, I'll also do a quick rundown of every single fight, again, just for those of you who missed the initial part. July 3 on Showtime, Chris Colbert versus Yuri Ortiz Gamboa, interim WBA super featherweight title. July 17 on Showtime TV. This is the one that I'm personally looking forward to the most. Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castaño, the undisputed WBA, WBO, WBC, and IBF junior middleweight titles. I don't think there's any fight that's better right now at 154 than this one. I think Castaño is going to be Charlo's toughest test so far as the pros. And yes, I am including the first fight against Tony Harrison, which I honestly thought Charlo won. And Charlo, Charlo was in a tough fight in both fights against Tony Harrison, but I think Brian Castaño is going to be an even tougher test for Jermell. And then home stretch here, August 14 on Showtime, Guillermo Rigondeaux versus John Riel Casimero for the WBO bantamweight title. August 28 on Showtime, David Benavidez versus Jose Uzcategui, WBC super middleweight title eliminator. Presumably, winner of this fight becomes the #1 contender or the mandatory, or however the WBC is going to label the winner of this one, as the number one guy or mandatory to the WBC super middleweight title currently being held by Canelo Alvarez. Don't expect the winner of this fight. First of all, it's in August, so you're not going to get Canelo going up against the winner for a very long time. Probably not until 2022, maybe 2021, December 2021, if Canelo still fights in December. So that might be the earliest that we see the winner of that fight Canelo or whoever is the WBC champion at that point. And then lastly, September 11th on Showtime, a unification fight that is not yet finalized. And the reason is because it is Stephen Fulton Jr., WBO champion at Super Bantamweight, against the winner of Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa from the May 15 card that is kicking off this impressive slate of fights. It's going to be for the unified WBO and WBC Super Bantamweight titles. Oh boy, that was a mouthful. That was quite a mouthful for me, having to go run through every single card that got announced. I need a drink of water. And all right, so my initial thoughts on this. I thought that these fights collectively, not saying every single one of them is fantastic, but I think a lot of these cards, a lot of these fights are really, really damn good. And even some of the ones that aren't great 50-50 fights, there's some that are still interesting, and you got a couple of good guys, not fighting tomato cans in my opinion. I mean, Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa. That's a really good fight at Super Bantamweight for the WBC title. Brandon, I think, is someone that may have gotten a little bit too much criticism in the past. I like Brandon Figueroa a lot. I think that he is someone who does a great job mixing things well, fighting on the inside, using his range at times, although I do not like Brandon Figueroa fighting on the inside and at close distance so much in his fights when he has the clear reach and height advantage in a lot of his fights. He can't get cute against Luis Nery. Luis Nery, even though I've said in the past, he doesn't feel like he has the same power at Super Bantamweight as he had at Bantamweight. He's still a dangerous fighter. He is still one of the most dangerous fighters at 122 pounds. And this will really be, it's actually really going to be a barometer test for both of these guys, because Figueroa has looked good, has become a top 10 fighter at Super Bantamweight, but he hasn't had that one clear signature win at the division. And it's not really, at this point, it's not a question of when if Brandon Figueroa is going to leave Super Bantamweight, but when. Because listen, Brandon Figueroa is still a growing boy, and he will eventually move up to featherweight. He's going to, it's almost inevitable at this point, but a win against Luis Nery would be a feather on his cap. Luis Nery is still a dangerous fighter. I don't think he's as dangerous as he was at bantamweight. Maybe you could blame it on he failed the drug test. He was overblown in his, as far as weight is concerned for the rematch against Shinsuke Yamanaka, which, I mean, by the way the WBC handled that whole situation, utterly disgraceful, in my opinion. A guy fails a drug test, or test positive for a drug test after a title fight, doesn't lose his title, but instead is forced to fight the same guy again, and then Luis Nery comes in overweight, not just for bantamweight, but super bantamweight the first time he stepped onto the scales. But that's neither here nor there. I've never been a fan. I've always hated how Luis Nery's run at bantamweight ended. I think that will forever taint his career and his legacy, and that's not a point that's not something I will budge on. That's how I feel. But he's still a very good fighter, even a fighter who is not as dangerous, in my opinion, as he was a super bantamweight. Luis Nery still possesses a ton of power. Now, you could look at the Aaron Alameda fight and think to yourself, maybe the sum of the mystique of Luis Neri is kind of went down just a little bit, only because he wasn't able to take out this unknown fighter in Aaron Alameda. And credit to Aaron. Aaron did a phenomenal job. He showed a ton of heart and spirit, and he did have a good showing. But I mean, is Luis Neri that much better right now than he was a few years ago? I don't think so. I don't agree with that. But I think that this will be a great test for Brandon Figueroa. If he beats Luis Neri, you have to consider him as an elite 122-pound boxer. You have to. There's no two ways about it. And if Figueroa doesn't win, if he loses this fight, I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to step up to featherweight and try to win a title there. Then, some of these other fights. Nordinho Bali versus Nonito Donaire. I love this fight. I think Nordinho Bali is... Maybe it's weird calling a world champion who's been a champion for a couple of years now underrated, but because it's the bantamweight division, and we're so swept up in Nonito Donaire and his tremendous resurgence, and Naoya Inoue and him arguably being the best pound-for-pound boxer in the world, and then you got John Riel Casimero. I mean, it does feel like Nordinho Bali is underrated because he's not getting quite the shine as some of these other bantamweight guys have been getting in recent years. But the thing is, Nordinho Bali is, after Inoue, he's arguably the best guy at 118 pounds. I mean, look at the resume that he's gotten in a somewhat short time as WBC champion. He beat Rashid Warren. He dominated Takuma Inoue, and he's looked good. He's looked good in a lot of fights. He looked impressive against Artur Villanueva in that, I think it was an MTK Global card that, for some reason had Ubali and Artur Villanueva in it. But regardless, I think this will be a very, very good fight. I think the problem with Nonito Donaire is that Nonito is almost 40. He is coming off a phenomenal fight, an instant classic, one of the best bantamweight world title fights that we'll ever see, in my opinion, against Naoya Inoue in 2019. Here's the issue. How much has that fight taken out of Nonito Donaire? Was that Donaire's, as we sometimes like to say in boxing, that last great fight before he hangs it up? Donaire, if we get the Donaire that we've been seeing in the World Boxing Super Series, I wouldn't be surprised if he beats Ubali. That's how good Nonito Donaire is, and you can't deny, heading into that fight against Naoya Inoue, the momentum that he's gotten ever since, he decided to move back down to bantamweight after losing to Carl Frampton a couple of years ago. There is a level of confidence in Nonito Donaire in fighting at bantamweight that really has propelled him to becoming an elite bantamweight again at almost 40 years old. It's almost it's so impressive to watch, but I wonder how much did that fight against Naoya Inoue take out of him? I mean, we're kind of having that same question with Naoya Inoue. Now, granted, he was able to, still showcase that he's still one of the best boxers in the world pound for pound when he fought Jason Maloney, but I mean, Nonito was the one who lost. Nonito was the one who got stopped. I'm very curious. This could easily be a great 50-50 fight, or it could easily be Ubali dominating Nonito Donaire and this being maybe Nonito Donaire's swan song. We'll see. I mean, we're only 6 weeks away, give or take, 6 weeks away from the fight. So I'm excited for this one. Jermell Charlo versus Juan Macias Montiel. Gotta be honest, not a big fan of this fight. I mean, Montiel got some great momentum because of the way he beat James Kirkland late last year, but I mean, it was a James Kirkland that you can argue probably shouldn't even have been out there in the ring. And I'm gonna be honest, I smell another another quick fight for Jermell Charlo. I mean, aside from Brandon Adams, and aside from, Jermell Charlo's run at middleweight, it's been either long, dominating 12-round fights, or they just been quick knockouts, quick stoppages. And if I'm being honest, I see this fight being the latter. Montiel, he's not on Jermell Charlo's level. I think that this will be, kind of a nice appetizer leading into next week's, to the following week's pay-per-view event. I don't think that Jermell Charlo is going to have much trouble in this one. I think Jermell Charlo is going to dominate Juan Macias Montiel. They're going to need to bring in a good undercard to get me more excited about that event, because I got to be honest, it's one of the weaker main events. Well, actually, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to go down through every single main event that was announced. On paper, I would say every main event that was announced by Showtime is better than Jermell Charlo versus Juan Macias Montiel, with the exception of David Benavidez versus Jose Uzcategui. You can argue maybe Chris Colbert against Yuriorkis Gamboa. You can make that argument. I actually wouldn't be opposed to saying that, that fight is not as good as Charlo versus Montiel, but not thrilled about this fight. But I'm not saying, but I'm not gonna go poo-poo on this one. Jermell Charlo is great. Jermell Charlo is one of the best middleweights in the world, arguably the best middleweight in the world. So I'm excited to see Charlo back in the ring, but hopefully they bring in a good undercard. June 26th, Gervonta Davis versus Mario Barrios. When Davis beat Leo Santa Cruz last year, and before the fight, I was kind of joking around, where if Santa Cruz beats Davis, he technically would own some type of hardware from 126 to 130 to 135. Even though they're not all the top titles for the WBA, it's still some type of hardware for Santa Cruz. Now Davis could potentially have titles from 130 to 135 and 140. By the way, all WBA, two of those three being the regular title, and the one super title is the one that shouldn't actually be a super title, but that's something I'm not going to get into, because the WBA super featherweight title, man, that is something that I will fight a lot of people on regarding what is considered the true world title, but that's neither here nor there. If Gervonta Davis beats Mario Barrios, he technically owns hardware at 3 different weight classes, which, I mean, I guess is about as close to some modern day Willie Pep shit as you'll ever see, but it's a good fight. I think on paper, Mario Barrios presents a lot of unique challenges to Gervonta Davis. Barrios towers over Gervonta Davis. He's about 5-6 inches taller than Tank, several inches longer as far as reach is concerned. And Barrios has above average power. He does have above average power. He showed it in the fight against Batir Akhmedov, which, by the way, I thought Akhmedov won. But it's hard to win a decision when you get knocked down twice. So, I mean, you can ask Tyson Fury that question too. And he looked good against Ryan Carl. I mean, actually, he looked great against Ryan Carl. I wish Barrios had fought Regis Prograis. And by the way, quick plug, I did talk to Regis Prograis a few weeks back, and I asked him about the Mario Barrios fight. You can check out that interview on this channel. You can just click on the channel link, and you'll quickly see the interview with Regis Prograis, where we actually talk about guys like Adrian Broner and Mario Barrios, and what does Regis Prograis thinks about his upcoming fight this Saturday on Triller. So just a quick plug right there. Davis and Mario Barrios. I'm not sure how much. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense as a pay-per-view. I get it. You want to turn Gervonta Davis into a pay-per-view star. But is Barrios really the guy that you follow up after Leo Santa Cruz? I don't. But I get it. I get why you can market this as history in the making, where Gervonta, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Gervonta could potentially be a 3-division champ. But I don't know. It's gonna have to be, if you ask me, this has to be another $50 price tag like they're doing with Andy Ruiz and Chris Arreola over on Fox. I don't think there's going to be a ton of people that are going to be excited for paying $70 on this one. The co-main event is good. Co-main event is really good. Erickson Lubin versus Jason Rosario. That makes a lot of sense as the title eliminator. Rosario has been looking great up until losing to Jermell Charlo. Rosario is still a very, very good fighter, and an ever-changing 154-pound division that seems to be churning out new contenders, new champions almost on a regular basis. And Lubin, I love the narrative of Lubin's career trajectory. He was a highly touted prospect, went up and faced Jermell Charlo at Barclays Center. I was there when Charlo just completely knocked Erickson Lubin's socks off. I was there. I was ringside when it happened, and that was quite a sight to see. And to an extent, you can definitely make the argument that Lubin got pushed way too hard, way too early, didn't properly get developed for a guy to take on a guy like Jermell Charlo. So I'm seeing this fight, and I think it's great. I think Lubin has definitely improved somewhat since the fight against Jermell Charlo. I'm not gonna go out and say Erickson Lubin has been an absolute world beater, but he's a top 10 guy. I think whoever wins this fight, I think definitely makes a case for fighting the winner of Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castaño, and they're gonna have to figure out the mandatory title situation, because that is, when it comes to Undisputed, you're gonna be dealing with quite a number of mandatories, and Erickson Lubin and Jason Rosario, I wouldn't be surprised they're gonna push hard to be that first guy to face the Charlo Castaño winner. Let's see what else. Chris Colbert versus Yuriorkis Gamboa. I mean, gotta be honest, I don't like this fight. And not saying that, this is a fight where Chris Colbert could lose. I mean, obviously, you could always lose, but when we're talking about the development and the growth of someone like Chris Colbert, and you want to keep that momentum up, I guess from a name recognition standpoint, I guess something to sort of bolster your resume, I guess Gamboa kind of makes sense, but not really. I mean, let's be honest. If Chris Colbert looks great against Yuriorkis Gamboa, and I think he will, what exactly is that going to do for him? It's not a step up. It's not going to raise his stock. It's not going to take it down. To me, it's a lateral step in his career. It's neither great. It's neither bad. So, I mean, I guess, if you couldn't find a better opponent for Chris Colbert, I guess Yuriorkis Gamboa makes sense, but I don't know. After he got dominated by Gervonta Davis, and credit to Gamboa, he looked terrific for someone who was fighting on one foot. He looked great. Just somehow managing to go all the way into the championship rounds with a torn Achilles. That takes a lot of guts. That takes a lot of credit and toughness to pull off, but I'm not a big, he just got dominated by Gervonta Davis. And after all the time that he was off, and now finally getting a chance for another title shot, he goes up against Devin Haney, and Gamboa loses virtually every single round. So, after that, I don't know why. I don't see any reason to get super excited about watching another Yuriorkis Gamboa fight. I'm excited to watch Chris Colbert. Chris Colbert's, one of the best fighters at 130 pounds. He's one of the fastest rising guys in the division. I absolutely love watching him fight. He is such a joy to watch. But Gamboa just doesn't do it for me anymore. Didn't do it for me 5 years ago. Didn't do it for me 6 years ago. Certainly not going to do it for me right now. So, if Colbert beats Yuriorkis Gamboa, good. I don't think it really improves his stock. I don't that much, if at all. Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano. God, I love this fight. This fight, I don't know if it's going to be the best fight out of the ones that have been announced, but it's the one I am most looking forward to. I'm someone who loves watching undisputed title fights in this 4-belt era in boxing. It's becoming a lot harder to pull off, but they've been able to do it. Alexander Usyk was able to do it by winning the World Boxing Super Series against Murat Gassiev. Terence Crawford was able to do it at 140 pounds when he beat... I'm blanking on the name, but Julius Ndongo. That's who he beat. And then, you got on the women's side, Katie Taylor, Jessica McCaskill, Clarissa Shields becoming undisputed at 160 and 154. So there's been quite a number of undisputed title fights in the last few years. And we also got, coming up next month, Jose Ramirez versus Josh Taylor, unifying the 140-pound division. And if all goes well, maybe Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury this summer, that unifies the entire heavyweight division. So, there's a lot to love about undisputed title fights, because it's the best go up against the very best. And I think these guys are. Charlo looked great in the fight against Jason Rosario. And the fact that he beat Rosario, that he knocked him out with a jab, is just so damn impressive. Castano, I've been saying this for a very long time. I have been high, very, very high on Castano, even when he was fighting in France. Like, before he was fighting Erislan De Lara and having more of a presence in the US, I was really, really high on Brian Castano. I just kept saying he was one of the best fighters at 154 pounds, maybe the best fighter that you've never heard of at 154 today. And I'm glad Castano is getting this type of fight. He absolutely amazed me and just blew away my expectations when he went up against Patrick Teixeira. And I thought that was going to be more of a 50-50 fight. I thought if it came down to just boxing ability, I thought Castano was going to win it. But I know that Patrick Teixeira was strong and tough and someone who can definitely come from behind in big fights. But Castano just absolutely dominated Patrick Teixeira. And when he won the WBO title, I just clamored for the fight against Jermell Charlo. I kept saying, there is literally no other fight at 154 pounds that makes any sense if it's not Charlo versus Castano. Like, that's the fight to make, and that's the fight to make right now. And I'm glad they didn't beat around the bush, and I'm glad that they did not waste any time. I love this fight. Man, this is going to be one of the best fights of 2021, in my opinion. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is going to be one of the best fights of the year. At least on paper, it's a phenomenal fight. And on paper, it's one of the fights I'm most looking forward to this year. Guillermo Rigondeaux versus John Riel Casimero. And this fight took place 3 years ago. I wouldn't be as excited about it as I am right now. I think Guillermo Rigondeaux, in this post-Vasily Lomachenko version of the Cuban boxer, he's no longer that purely technical boxer, highly skilled guy that, quite frankly, wasn't exciting to watch. Not a knock on his ability. His abilities are still tremendous. It just didn't make for a fun TV product. But since losing to Lomachenko, it almost feels like Rigondeaux has becoming more of an offensive-oriented boxer-puncher, has looked great, has had some really fun fights as of late, but defensively, his skill set has definitely gone down a bit. Guillermo Rigondeaux, he has passed his prime. Still a very good fighter, but definitely not a true elite pound-for-pound guy anymore. Not by a long shot. And Casimero has been looking so damn impressive since 2019. Cesar Juarez, Zolani Tete, Duke Micah last year on pay-per-view. I mean, if there was any fighter today that could beat Naoya Inoue at 118, it's John Rio Casimero. If there's one guy to do it, it's definitely him. Casimero is a dynamic puncher who is relentless and is not afraid to attack the body and to throw these vicious combinations from the start of the fight. You saw that in the Zolani Tete fight. You saw that in the Duke Micah fight. And I think this is going to be another instance where Casimero just completely obliterates, Guillermo Rigondeaux. It's going to make for a fun fight, however long it's going to take, but it's not going to be a very long fight. I think Rigondeaux, if this was Rigondeaux from 2016, from 2017, I think it'll be a much closer fight, but the version of Rigondeaux that we've been seeing for the last couple of years, I think this is a style that's perfectly made for Casimero, a guy who is not afraid to go on the attack, but also has been known to kind of sacrifice his body a little bit, has been getting hit quite a lot, and that's the kind of opponent Casimero excels at. And this will be, I think Casimero wins this one. I think Casimero will probably get maybe a mid-round stoppage, and that might be it for Rigondeaux as a, fighting in world title fights, but it's going to be a fun fight, however short it's going to be. David Benavidez versus Jose Uzcategui, WBC Super Middleweight title eliminator. Gotta be honest, this fight sucks. This fight absolutely sucks. Not a knock on Benavidez, who is certainly still elite, in my opinion, at 168 pounds, but I mean, why? Why is Uzcategui in this position? Like, it kind of baffles me. Like, where's Lionel Thompson? The guy who beat Jose Uzcategui last year. The guy who was the underdog against Uzcategui in 2019 on Showtime. Why isn't he in this position to fight Benavidez? In my opinion, he deserves that shot, the fight against Benavidez, a hell of a lot more than Uzcategui. But, I mean, I don't want to say Uzcategui is damaged goods, but there's nothing to be that impressed about or to like about Uzcategui after he lost to Caleb Plant, after he lost to Lionel Thompson. This is a massive fight in this. I don't see this fight going that well for Uzcategui. Now, Benavidez, he's gonna try to reclaim the WBC title again because, he lost the title the first time for failing a drug test. He lost the title the second time for missing weight. I mean, right now, it's for me the same with Brandon Figueroa, only to a much bigger extent, where it's not a question of when, if he's gonna move up in weight, but when. And this is really the last-ditch effort for Benavidez in 168. I really don't see why, if he faces Canelo Alvarez, whoever the WBC champion, in the next 12 to 16 months, then I get sticking around 168. But I think Benavidez would do so much better. Well, not so much better. I mean, he won a world title. He won 2 world titles at 168. So I don't know how much better you can get from there. But I think he's going to be fighting at a better, more natural weight at 175. And I don't know what he'd be waiting for. Now, granted, if he goes to 175, it's going to be damn near impossible for him to get title shots against the current crop of champions, because 3 of the 4 belts are with Top Rank, and the other one's with Matchroom, and neither of those 2 companies are exactly buddy-buddy with PBC, so I don't see that. So I can also see why he would stick around at 168, because there is a better chance of getting a title shot or find some way to get into the world title picture. I think Benavidez is gonna just dominate Jose Uzcategui. If I'm being honest, I don't think that this is gonna be a 50. I don't think this is gonna be a close fight. This is gonna be closer to Ronald Ellis, when Benavidez just kept hammering away at Ronald Ellis, and Ellis was just throwing and throwing punches, but just kept getting hit. He just kept getting hit hard. He was getting outclassed. This is going to be another instance of that. So I don't think this is going to be a great fight. But, it'll be a nice squash match, in my opinion. it's out of the ones in this list of main events, I can make a very strong argument. This is the weakest one. This is the weakest main event. And, maybe Jermell Charlo versus Juan Macias Montiel because of how lopsided it is on paper. And Chris Colbert versus Yorikis Gamboa is a fight that I don't love, but I guess you can talk yourself into it making sense as far as elevating Chris Colbert because Gamboa is a name and he's technically a bigger name than Jezreel Corrales, who I would say would be Colbert's biggest win up to that point. So you can talk yourself into Colbert versus Gamboa making sense, not necessarily from a Colbert development standpoint, but it'll make sense to some extent. And then lastly, Stephen Fulton Jr. versus the winner of Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa. Regardless of what happens, this is going to be a fantastic fight. I'm just going to be honest. Regardless of who wins, that's going to make for an awesome fight with Stephen Fulton Jr. Fulton looked so damn good against Angelo Leo in January. And I will be honest, I kind of picked Angelo Leo to win that fight heading in. And I was wrong. And full credit to Stephen Fulton Jr. because he completely outclassed Angelo Leo. It was a showcase fight for the ages for a guy to win his first world title in that way. And he's been wanting unification fights. And the moment he won the WBO title, he was like, I want more belts. And at only 22, he's in a perfect position to fight for more belts. And you got Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa. Whoever wins is going to make for a really good fight. Now, I would say I would favor Stephen Fulton over either of these guys. I think Fulton is a far more technical, is a far better boxer, technically speaking, than Luis Nery as far as acumen and fundamentals. I think that Fulton is going to outbox Nery, and I think Fulton is smart enough to avoid some of Nery's bigger punches. Against Brandon Figueroa, I think Fulton Jr. is going to make this fight a close quarters war, and if we're talking about fighting on the inside, I think Fulton's a better fighter. And not just that, it does kind of negate Figueroa's, I believe, I think he is longer and taller. So I like this fight. I really, really like this fight because regardless of what happens, I think it's going to make for a really good fight. Now, if you ask me what makes for a better, more exciting fight, I think Brandon Figueroa wins. I think Brandon Figueroa against Stephen Fulton Jr. is a better fight. So it's hard to really make that much of an assessment and preview for that fight because we don't know who wins between Luis Nery and Brandon Figueroa. So you can make an argument for either guy. I would not necessarily say it's a 50-50 fight. If gun to my head, even though I said I really like Brandon Figueroa, I still worry a lot about, his defensive lapses at times. Sometimes likes to get too cute fighting on the inside. That's the kind of fight that Luis Nery does pretty well in, and he is a very strong puncher. I'm going to go and say I think Luis Nery might win this one. Like 55-45 Luis Nery for me in my head. But if you ask me what's the more exciting fight for Fulton, I think it's Brandon Figueroa. So, boy, this has been a long preview, but there's a lot of really good fights in this slate of cards that Showtime announced. And I'm going to end this off with another quick rundown of all the different fights that got announced from May 15th to September 11th on Showtime. So, here we go. I hope you're writing this down. Actually, no, kidding. I already got a thread on this on Twitter at Toro Media, so don't write it down. May 15, Luis Nery versus Brandon Figueroa. Danny Roman versus Ricardo Espinoza. Xavier Martinez versus Abraham Montoya. May 29, Nordinho Bali versus Nonito Donaire. Subriel Matias versus Batirjan Jukembayev. June 19, Jermell Charlo versus Juan Macias Montiel. June 26th on pay-per-view, Gervonta Davis versus Mario Barrios, and Erickson Lubin versus Jason Rosario. July 3 on Showtime TV, Chris Colbert versus Yorkis Gamboa. July 17, Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano, undisputed junior middleweight titles. August 14 on Showtime, Guillermo Rigondeaux versus John Riel Casimero. August 28th on Showtime, David Benavidez versus Jose Uzcategui. And September 11th, Stephen Fulton Jr. versus the winner of Luis Neri versus Brandon Figueroa, taking place on May 15th. That about wraps it up for this stream. We've been going here for about 40 minutes strong. Hope you guys, got well informed on some of the fights that are coming up. This is going to be a great year for Showtime Boxing. It's been a pretty good year for the network. We're just coming off a phenomenal card this past Saturday with Jaron Ennis beating Sergey Lipinets, Jordan Cajas having a really good fight against Jonathan Rodriguez, a Mantis Stanionis beating Thomas Delorme, a tougher than expected Thomas Delorme, and what was another really good fight. That card was really good. That whole Saturday was really good, but the Showtime card was fantastic in my opinion. So that about wraps it up for this edition of, or really not this edition, just really a random live stream just talking about these fights that got announced. So if you like what you saw here today, we got, again, this YouTube channel's got a ton of different interviews from pro wrestling, boxing, mainly boxing, and even some MMA, where I actually spoke with Adriano Moraes, who knocked out Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson on TNT this past week. So I got to talk to him, and we got a number of interviews from this month alone. Just kind of going down the list of videos and boxing interviews that I've done in the last 2 weeks or so. You got Brian Howard, F.A. Jakba, you got Sebastian Fundora, Omar Figueroa, Abel Ramos are fighting on pay-per-view very soon, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. and Anderson Silva, Bryant Perella, who is fighting on PBC on Fox against Tony Harrison this Saturday, Ray Flores, the always great Ray Flores, the tremendous broadcaster in boxing, now in pro wrestling with MLW, Quentin Randall and Aaron Aponte, who are also fighting on April 17th. So a lot of interviews here on this channel. So hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell icon for notifications on my future videos and more. And that about wraps it up for this live stream reaction to Showtime Championship Boxing's great 2021 schedule. Hope you guys enjoyed the fights, and I'll see you in the next one.